For the Network Magic systemic strategy development example, we started with a high tech company called Network Magic, which has developed a set of network routers that have a very attractive price point to the market, and the company has been growing by leaps and bounds. And as a consequence, they have not been able to staff up rapidly enough to satisfy their requirements for resources to be able to adequately respond to their customers in the customer support organization and the rest of the segments of the organization to be able to grow and develop and meet the developing demands. And what makes the situation even worse is that the rest of the organization continues to steal people from customer support. So we started with this initial situation for Network Magic, and we then spent time and developed the pattern of behavior for the relevant aspects of the current situation as we understood them. We developed a model that gave us a better sense of the interactions in terms of what support is trying to do in terms of continuing to develop and maintain the level of support readiness while the rest of the organizations are in fact trying to staff up to meet their workload requirements. We identified and looked at the various stakeholders involved, being the customer support organization, other organizations within Network Magic management, and the customers, and their objectives and priorities, and then established a set of boundaries so we understood who was responsible for which aspects of the situation. We spent time investigating the assumptions that we may have made throughout these stages in the process to ensure that we are in fact on solid ground before we begin to identify the leverage points. We then identified what seemed to make sense as an appropriate set of places where we could in fact interact with the structure to effect a change so that the situation would in fact improve in the future. And from that set of leverage points, we crafted a strategy that is in fact a sequence of things that the organization should do in a time-ordered manner to implement things so that when the stakeholders adopt that strategy, the set of interactions actually changes and creates a different set of behaviors, and therefore the situation is different than it was before and should be what the organization is trying to create for its future. And the strategy was, in developing the strategy, we explicitly took into account alternatives, possible outcomes, because we were in fact attempting to ensure that we minimize unintended consequences, because unintended consequences tend to make things worse or just create new problems that we have to solve later. And we know that as much as we endeavor to minimize unintended consequences, it's not possible to absolutely ensure that there will in fact never be any unintended consequences. I mean, how do you think they got the name unintended consequences to start with? So developing the strategy and implementing is not the end, it's actually the beginning. When you plant the garden, if you actually want it to grow and develop and produce a good crop, planting the garden is not the last step. You in fact have to tend the garden along the way. You have to water it, you have to pull the weeds, you have to keep the animals out of it so they don't eat your crop. So implementing the strategy is equivalent to planting the garden, and once you have planted it, you have to continue to maintain it and continue to look for unintended consequences which are likely to arise in areas that you simply could not predict initially. And when you identify them, you then essentially alter the strategy in a way to mitigate the unintended consequences before they actually come into play and derail the direction that you're trying to develop in. Of course, the one thing that you have to realize and pay attention to is that almost nobody ever gets credit for problems that don't happen, which is the situation that evolves when you, in fact, look at unintended consequences and foresee their development and take care of them before they actually become unintended consequences. So it's a sad state of affairs. Well, I hope you found this interesting, and I'll go look for another example that I can develop a sequence for systemic strategy. Take care. Bye.